Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to a game week episode of Hail Yes. That's right. We're back, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan football and basketball writer for The Free. Pumped to join you today, just more than 72 hours away from time of taping the season opener. And by the time this comes out Thursday morning, it will be just 2 days away. Hard to believe, but excited that the time has arrived. Joining me now, our Big Ten insider, as always, Reiner Saban. And Reiner, the season, even sooner for you, technically, right? Friday night in East Lansing. Are you ready for another campaign?
Yeah, this is always an interesting week. Did it last year where you basically have two games in a span of 24 hours. In that case, it was actually a night game and then followed by a early kickoff at noon. This time there's a little bit more time between, so I'm thankful for that. Should be hopefully rested and ready for the game Saturday night.
Our columnist Sean Windsor will hear absolutely none of your complaining about two games in 1 day. He just calls that fall. As all of you know, our esteemed colleague Sean Windsor, our columnist, who is either in Ann Arbor or East Lansing just about every Saturday, and wherever the Lions are on Sunday, he's there as well. But no, we appreciate Reiner for doing his double dip as well. And then someone else who is familiar with the double dip is our producer and editor. See, that's the two handles that he holds. Handle? That wasn't the word I was looking for. Title. That's the word we're looking for. Andrew Burkle. What's up?
Pumped for football, guys. I mean, it's coming up here fast, and even Thursday we'll have a slate of games, pretty unimpressive slate of games that Thursday, but it gets going on Saturday, so I'm excited for it.
I haven't looked closely at Thursday. Best basically, Thursday game.
It's Minnesota, North Carolina. Minnesota, North Carolina is the best game, which, I mean, it's not appointment viewing, but when it's this week, when it's week one, everything feels appointment viewing to me, at least.
Oh, row the boat, Sky, you might go Gophers. That's it. Have you heard PJ Fleck say it? And I mean, Reiner's done it a million times at his, it's one of my favorite Big Ten Media Day just moments when he ends his introduction every time. It's all one long word. Row the boat, Sky, you might go Gophers, right? And it's like all the catchphrases, and he just says it all with no breath, no air, no nothing. So we will see if they can row over North Carolina on Thursday. All right, without further ado, here's how this show is going to break down. We're going to start segment one, part one, Fresno State preview, obviously game week. We're going to go position by position. Reiner and I will each give you just sort of an overarching thought about each position group as we have finally arrived at the season. Then a quick break, and on the back end, you didn't think we forgot about the picks, did you? Maybe our favorite time. We love it all, but the picks, they get spicy. So we will pick 5 college football games, what we deemed probably the 5 best, including Michigan, of this opening weekend. And then attached to that back end, I'm not sure if you've heard, there was a Netflix documentary that came out around Connor Stalions, kind of relevant in the Michigan football program, but not everybody wants to hear about it off the bat. So we've tried to find a compromise. It is news. We need to talk about it, but we want to get into game week first. So we're going to do that on the end, and we encourage you to stick around for it. All right. Position by position, I wonder where we're going to start. Reiner, what can we expect from this Michigan quarterback position?
Well,
what is your main thought going into it?
Well, I just think it's, it would be nice if they provided some clarity as to the decision. I mean, they're not going to do that. I mean, I guess they see some kind of competitive advantage. I don't quite understand that, although I've seen it before where at Alabama, they did it, or they didn't announce till right before the 2018 season opener against Louisville. They finally decided that Tua Tagovailoa was going to start over Jalen Hurts after he threw the 2nd and 26 touchdown pass and led them to that comeback victory in the championship game over Georgia. I mean, it seemed pretty obvious that he was going to be the guy all along. Saban had been setting that up for the whole time. I feel like Michigan in some ways has been setting it up for Alex Orji to be the guy. I think that's who they want to be the guy. I think they think that his added dimension with his mobility can also open up things for the running game. I'd be kind of surprised if he's not the person who's taking the first snap Saturday. Now, I don't know, again, how much they want to maybe integrate Davis Warren in potentially, just because the idea of just maybe throwing some different packages or even giving him some run in that, just to see what he looks like versus Orji, if they have the opportunity. But I would assume that they would probably like to go with Orji for the opener.
Yeah, as head coach Sharon Moore said on 97.1 The Ticket this morning, Wednesday morning, they have thought about, a two-quarterback system obviously has gone through his mind at some point, but he said the goal was to, quote, hone in on a starter. So it looks like they do want to do it. And as far as if you are working them both in, right, at least a little bit, Reiner, my thought would be that would mean Davis Warren is the guy who gets the nod, and Orji is the one who sort of comes in, as we've seen him do last year. And I would expect them to expand his packages, right? Not just options, not just read options, but RPOs, like a genuine read pass option, play actions, those sorts of things. But I am with you. It does feel as though Orji's the guy they wanted. He has the higher ceiling. Now, I'm not going to change my tune. All offseason, I was saying, we haven't got to see them, right? In live action, behind the scenes and all those things. But my belief was that there's so much on this team. You might want sort of a high floor guy. I don't know that you need the high ceiling right now, but Orji still, it just feels, the way the vibes are around it, it just feels like it's going to be his job. However, as we've spoken to different coaches, right? Today it was offensive line coach Grant Newsom, and I was asking him about the competition, and if it were up to him, if he would have sort of named one, and just try to poke around and see what his thoughts are about this. And I was like, and I asked the question sort of that you just said, right, with Orji as the assumed guy, and he's like, I wouldn't say that, right? Was that,
right? Yeah, well, yeah. I don't think they're going to kiss and tell, and they haven't done that the whole time that we've been talking in the preseason camp. Again, players have been, it seems like, clearly instructed not to give away any kind of hints as to who the person is. They say everybody's doing well, and the offense is no different with one player versus the other, which, you kind of stretches belief. In the sense that, obviously Alex Orji provides a much different dimension and dynamic than Davis Warren does. I think the reason why, and also I think, you have to lean towards Orji, and I wrote about this earlier in the summer, was the idea that, again, you're bringing in 5 new starters in the offensive line. Again, he can help solve some pass protection issues early on. That's usually the thing that takes the longest development. Run game, it's a lot easier to block, for run game, obviously moving forward instead of having to kind of, press back. And so I think, again, Orji gives you a little bit more of that. And also I think he enhances the run game because he can get out on the perimeter. So they can't, key in on the, A and B gaps and clog the thing, which is, sometimes what Donovan Edwards has had struggles with. Running between the tackles. He can get out wide and everything, but, if some holes open up because Orji is there, then I think, again, Michigan's leaning towards that idea of, having him out there because of the effect he can have on a defense.
Just to weigh in here, we were kind of talking offline here about the quarterback dynamic and whether or not they could, in fact, play 2 guys. Tony, you had some strong takes on this as far as you think that once they have one guy go in, they have to stick with that guy. Why do you think that?
Well, it's just about sort of the signal that it sends to the team, just overall. Now, had they said we want to give both of these guys run, now that could be a different story, right? If you go in like arms wide open, like, hey, like Michigan did 2 years ago with Cade, with JJ, look, we're going to give both these guys a chance. We're going to see how it goes. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I can understand it. When you're doing what Michigan's doing this year, which by all accounts is a quarterback competition, if someone has won it behind the scenes, what would it say about your confidence in your decision? Should there be 4 or 5 bad series, maybe one half of football we're talking about, and then you just pull it, right? How confident were you in that decision? What had he actually done to win the job? And if he had, I know every game is important, but are we really pulling him after 4 or 5 series after one half? I just think that, I think it's really risky business, and I think you're on a very, very slippery slope once that happens, because his confidence is shot, whoever he is, right? Or one could make that leap. Then let's say guy number 2 doesn't pan out perfectly. Now we got nobody. Now both of our guys are, their confidence is low.
Normally, I 100% agree with that. And there is certain circumstances, especially in the NFL, where it's like, okay, we have to start this guy because we can't take him out and go back to him. However, I think in this situation, sometimes it's truly a know it when you see it type deal. Like, oh man, like this is not happening. Almost like pulling the goalie in hockey. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of know when it has to happen. So I think that they'd want to leave their options open for that, just in case, God forbid for Michigan fans, if, all of a sudden you look at the scoreboard, you're down 14-3 and Alex Orgy's gone, 3 and out 3 straight times. Maybe it's time to try a spark. The other thing I'll add to that is I think if you do start with Orgy and you put Warren in, I think you could go back to Orgy. But if it was the other way around, it'd be a tougher sell where if you start with Warren, then go to Orgy, then go back to Warren, that doesn't really make as much sense. Does that check out to you?
I want to hear what Reiner thinks about that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Tony, but I mean, again, I saw it again, 2016, just Alabama opened against USC. They started Blake Barnett, and then they went to Jalen Hurts after like the first series. He stunk in the first, and it was clear that Jalen Hurts was the better option. I mean, and I don't know if they did that just because, again, Barnett had more experience. He was like a redshirt freshman, whereas, Jalen Hurts was a true freshman, and they decided that way. And I thought it was, interesting that they made that call as quickly as they did, but they saw something, like it seemed like the lights were too bright for him. They were playing at AT&T Stadium. It was, big deal. And so like, maybe they do, but that again, that's Saban. You can do that because you're Nick Saban, and you're not going to get questioned in that. Sharon Moore, this is his first real game as the real true head coach, the head of the program. So, I mean, like, yeah, it's a risky move if you immediately move off the guy that you assigned as a starter and quarterback, the premium position for the team. So I think there's a confidence factor in Sharon Moore that's also happening here.
And then quickly, before we get back to Andrew, Reiner, if you remember, and I know you do, what Kirk Campbell told us, right? Earlier this fall camp. I mean, it was your question that you asked about him and just about his dynamic with the quarterback and what he did at Old Dominion and just that give and take. Like, when do you make that decision, right? And his implication was whoever we pick, we're going to ride him for, I mean, it was more than 4 series, right? It felt more like 4 weeks. And like maybe if someone like going into Big Ten play, like if I don't think they're going to be 1-2 or something, but like 2-1, right? 2-1. They lost to Texas, but it hasn't looked great. Maybe they reassess, but I don't expect them. I have no expectation for them to be flip-flopping quarterbacks. Now, the caveat I will give to that is, should Warren be the guy, I could see packages for Orgy, like I said, like we've said, as they did last year. And you could see something like that, just because he's that dynamic. But I definitely don't see, I really couldn't see the opposite. Like, it would just feel so obvious. Like, Davis Warren's coming in. Pass. I just couldn't see him going 2 quarterbacks that way.
Yeah, I mean, I unless again it's preordained, where again Orgy plays the first 2 series regardless of what the results are, and then Davis Warren goes in on the 3rd series. I mean, like
a la Jonathan Smith at Oregon State.
Yeah, exactly, with Aiden Childs. Yeah, and so, but again, like you said, that would probably be the opposite scenario where you'd have Warren probably playing the first 2 series and Orgy going in. But it'll be interesting. Obviously, that's going to be the biggest storyline at the outset of the game. Depending on what happens in the game, it could be the only big storyline. Really, is like who's the starter.
Tony, you're a gambling man from time to time. Betting odds. I dabble. Alex Orgy walks onto the field as a starting quarterback first drive of the game.
-350.
Anything under that, I feel like would be -4. I could hear -450.
Yeah, -450, -450. Yeah. I mean,
that feels about right.
80%, 90% favorite. I would be
agreed.
Yeah, maybe -450. I would say Warren's probably +300 ish. I mean, it's lofty. It's lofty. I think that was good. I think that was good quarterback discussion. I guess we're allowed to say that about ourselves. So we'll move on. We'll move on to the other positions because it's, I mean, ho-hum, they're also kind of replacing, like an All-American running back, like the guy who has the most touchdowns in the history of in the program in one season, thousands and thousands of yards. I mean, he could have been the Heisman winner 2 years ago. Who we don't know how that would have shook out without the meniscus. Blake Corum's gone. Now the running back room. I found this interesting. Also on the radio this morning, Jim Costa and John Jansen 97.1 were talking with Sharon Moore, and he mentioned the 4 running backs. It was Donovan. It was Kalel. Neither of those are surprising. It was Ben Hall at number 3. I think that was also the expectation. The 4th running back out of his mouth was not Tavierre Dunlap. It was not Cole Cabana. It was, there we go, Jordan Marshall. I always want to say Zach Marshall. That's the tight end. It was Jordan Marshall, 4-star, incomer, true freshman. They've been hyping him up. Reiner, do you think he can get some run? Do you think he's for real RB4? And not just Jordan. Thoughts about the running back position?
I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, Donovan Edwards, I think that the key to, him is going to be whether he can make the consistent or have consistent production down to down and, not help Michigan fall behind the chains in early downs. And I think that was an issue early on last year. He finally found his groove towards the end of the season, probably related to, the knee injury a little bit, that he was recovering from, may have had some factor, had some of a impact on why he was struggling early on. But I mean, again, I think the big thing with him is, whether he can run between the tackles consistently. And then, it'll be interesting to see how Kirk Campbell also uses him as a, receiving option, maybe uses him differently than obviously Blake Corum, because again, they have different skill sets and different strengths. So I don't think it's going to be exactly the same. I mean, again, Kalel Mullings is probably more closer to Blake Corum than Donovan Edwards is. Edwards is kind of his own kind of guy. And so it'll be kind of a wait and see as far as what Donovan Edwards looks like in this particular offense. Again, I think he could stand to benefit from having Alex Orji as a quarterback, just because, again, I think Orji can extend plays to the perimeter, which will allow to open up the middle for Donovan Edwards.
The number one player, in my estimation, who would benefit from Alex Orji being on the field, I think you're right, is Donovan. He needs the space. I mean, you just hammered it. You just nailed it perfectly. He is not a between the tackles runner, unless Moses has planted that staff and the Red Seas have parted, right? I mean, short of that, there's got to be a pretty big hole, which he's sort of just kind of proven that. I mean, just looking back at the numbers last year, in the regular season, 6 rushes of 10 or more yards. 6 on the season. He had 13 first downs in 12 games, right? On the ground. I mean, this is terribly inefficient. And we've talked about it all offseason. He's come back. He's humbled himself. He found his fire again and a new role, right? All the combination of those things. Is that enough to get back to the Donovan of old? Time will tell. But what I do know is they are very excited about they got big, physical, fast running backs, right? I mean, these are it is good. I wonder, you don't want a back that you just know what they're going to do, right? Like Kalel, probably going to hammer it. Donovan, probably going to try to scamper. You want a little more versatility, but there is something to be said for the diversity in their running back room, even all the way down to Cole Cabana. I mean, like a slasher, someone who's a slot guy, kind of more like Donovan. Jordan Marshall seems to be, and was in high school, and is billed as really the do-it-all back. You got a lot of different looks for Michigan in that room, in Tony Alford's room. Wide receivers, shall we? Because I'm going to harp on it again, replacing 2 top 20 wideouts all time. Let's see if I can ask an interesting question to Reiner. Reiner, what would surprise you on Saturday from the wide receiver room, right? Like, what would have to happen in either direction, in any direction, for you to be like, well, that's not what I was expecting?
Yeah, they catch a bunch of. Oh, no, they catch one.
They catch a lot of passes.
One one long, deep 9 route type of throw from a quarterback. I mean, a fly, or deep post pattern or something like that. I would be surprised in some ways if they're able to hit some deep shots. I still have some questions about that. Whether they can do that, or it was an issue even with JJ, last couple his 2 years when he was starting. They weren't great in that area. And so I think that'll be interesting to watch. I'm curious to see if these guys can get off, tight coverage. I don't know, again, what the defensive scheme that Fresno State's going to be, employing. But I mean, if it's any kind of press or man, I'll be curious to see if they can get off and create some kind of separation. And so, and they don't really have that big receiver. I mean, Amorian Walker might be that guy, but, he's not exactly the biggest, frame in the sense that, from a, muscular standpoint, I mean, he's not like Nico Collins in that sense, or, even Donovan Peoples-Jones or something like that. So he's a little bit more slight. He's very fast, and which is why he got that unicorn nickname, a while back. But again, there's a lot of questions as far as like who that X receiver is for them.
Yeah, and you touched on it about how even with JJ, it took, I'd say, a full season and a half of McCarthy as a starter for him to start dialing in that deep ball. And it felt like for a time, even last year, they weren't doing it. They certainly figured it out based on the numbers. JJ on yards, on passes of 20 yards or further, this is per Pro Football Focus, he was 24 of 44 for 10 touchdowns and one pick. His NFL passer rating, 129.7. That's the highest it can be, is 158.3. Anything above 100 is very good. And he was almost 130. So you're right. I mean, kind of my job to know about it, but little did I know that they were quite that effective. And I mean, even 24, right? 24 completions, about 2 a game, right? There were 15 games, so it's not quite 2 a game, but that's enough. And 44 attempts, 3 a game, right? That's enough shots downfield to keep these defenses honest. And I think you're right.
I mean, the 20-yard thing, though, I mean, the numbers skewed a little. I mean, some of those things were not like
20 are right.
It was like right around that for a lot of.
I know it.
I mean, and so it wasn't that.
These are just the best numbers we have.
Right.
These are just the best numbers.
Yeah. And so like they really weren't hitting too many of those like really, those deep posts or, again, straight 9 routes. I mean, where guys were just beating guys, downfield, and, JJ was just hitting them in stride.
I'm trying to think of the only one that I really, really think of was from 2 years ago. It was Cornelius Johnson's second touchdown against Ohio State, right? On the post pattern from the right, not when he just dusted everyone on the curl on the third down.
There was a Roman Wilson in the TCU game,
that wasn't a touchdown. Not a touchdown.
No, it wasn't a touchdown, but I'm talking about like just to. I mean, there are a couple here and there, but I mean, they stick out.
What about last year? Those were both 2 years ago. Yeah, do you recall any?
I mean, there was a throw deep to Donovan Edwards against Purdue that I recall. In the corner.
Oh, in the regular season.
Yeah, the regular season game. Yeah. Trying to think any. I don't recall any other one that was really. I mean, there was that throw downfield from JJ to Colston Loveland against Indiana. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't their strong suit last year either, really.
No, it wasn't. Speaking of Colston Loveland, quite the segue. The tight end room looks like, it starts with Colston Loveland. Would you be surprised if he does not win the Mackey Award? Because that's right about where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got obviously a great shot at that. Also, I think he has a great shot at being the lead receiver for Michigan, which, again, he's going to be featured very, very much in Kirk Campbell's offense. I mean, Kirk Campbell's only time that he was offensive coordinator to the tight end was a big player in that offense. Went on, I think he's in the NFL right now. So, still in the NFL. And so, like, he's made it clear that he wants to feature the tight ends, and he's going to specifically probably throw to Colston Loveland, who they're going to be moving around all over the formation. So I would expect to see a lot of targets for Colston Loveland. So and I think Marlon Klein's going to be also a big factor too. I mean, they because they don't have that X receiver, they're going to have to do some stuff vertically. You're going to see probably a lot of stuff up the seams, and being able to try to take on matchup advantages with the linebackers and safeties, and those guys could potentially do that. So I see a lot with the tight ends, and particularly in Kirk Campbell's offense.
Didn't even mention Max Bredesen either, right? The captain who is, they all call him, the dude's dude, someone who really, they talk about when he was a walk-on and came on as a freshman, asking to play fullback just so he can find a way to help the team, right? And he's done that all this way. And so another room, very versatile. Andrew?
Just to push back here slightly as far as Tony, talking about winning the Mackey Award and some of the Loveland buzz. First of all, there's always a lot of good tight ends, especially in today's day and age of college football. And it seems like they almost always come out of nowhere. Maybe they have a couple big games down the stretch and really kind of build up their resume over the year. And I think you just never know with the tight end position. Secondly, maybe the case against Loveland would be that depth in the room, right? They're going to mix in a gadget play for Bredesen here and there. Klein appears, from everything we hear from camp, to be making a really strong push to get some reps as well. So I think that Loveland certainly deserves a lot of that buzz. Unbelievable talent. And is going to be debatably maybe Michigan's most effective player on offense. But still, even if he is that, there's a chance that he couldn't be winning with all these national awards and stuff.
Yeah, that is. It's the bias of covering that specific team. But yeah, MSU's got a guy. Jack Velling, who has a really good shot too, potentially. Based on how they run the offense at Michigan State. Auburn's got a really good guy. He has the tight end, I think, led Auburn in receiving. That was partially because they had no receivers, but still, he could.
McKinney?
Guy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There were 4 schools in the FBS because I was doing a story about that, but based on what Loveland being the potentially leading receiver for Michigan this year, but there were 4 schools that had the tight end as the leading receiver. Auburn was one of them. Kansas State was one. I think Georgia was one, and I can't remember what the other one was. So, but there's, it doesn't happen very often, but it could happen in any school that we're not even necessarily think. Utah, I think, may have been the other one. So, and Utah's got they've got a guy that again could. Yeah, Brad Kuthi or whatever his name is, that could potentially win the Mackey Award this year. He's on a preseason list.
No, it's not. It's not a one-man show. It's not a one-man race. I get that. I just, as Andrew mentioned earlier, betting man. And if I were allowed to on a team I covered, I got a lot of faith in Colston Loveland. And also, just very quickly, they're floating out a lot of Marlon Klein. I wonder if it's not a little smoke screen, little confidence builder for him going on. He and Colston just play such a similar position. I don't know how they're going to take him off the field for that. That was just an aside. But we got to keep this moving. The offensive line, here's my official prediction. Reiner, tell me if you disagree with any of these spots. Left tackle, Miles Hinton. Left guard, Josh Preeb. Center, Greg Crippen. Right guard, Gio El-Hadi. Right tackle, Andrew Gentry. Backing up Andrew Gentry will be Evan Link. Backing up Crippen at center will be Dom Gadis. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, sounds pretty good there. And it'll be interesting to see, particularly how Crippen performs. And I'm also, a little bit leery about Hinton just based on his performance last year. And so I know they're saying that he's really, turning the corner, but he remains a bit of a question mark. I think, again, he has the talent and the build, but I don't know. It just hasn't necessarily always translated to performance. So I'm curious about that. I think they're really solid at the two guard positions. Those are, I think, they're going to be the strength. They arguably were the strength last year from that offensive line. So with Zinter and Keegan.
It was one of my bold predictions last week, I think, on this podcast, just between Gio and Josh Preeb. I mean, they might be. I'm with you. They might be every bit as good as Zinter and Keegan. Let's flip to the other side of the ball. And we'll start in the front and work our way back. The defensive line. I was gonna tee it up. I was gonna say something. I don't even want to say anything. I just want to see Reiner when I say the defensive line and this game and this season. Where does your mind go?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good unit. I think, especially at the top of the depth chart. I mean, you've got, arguably, I don't think it's very much arguable. I mean, they have the best defensive tackle combination in the country with Graham and Grant. And then, they've got really, really some talented edge rushers that were emerging last year at the end of the season with Derek Moore, Josiah Stewart. So I think they're really solid and in the core of that unit. The depth is my concern, and also how many snaps are they going to play early on, and whether they can sustain their level of performance over the course of a pretty grueling schedule. And they didn't have to, again, contend with that. We've talked about this, the fact that, they really the starters didn't play very much, especially in the early part of the season, at least, as it pertained to playing late in the game. So they were able to keep their snap counts down. I don't think they're going to have that luxury this year. And so will they be able to sustain it over the course of the season? They said that they've done really well with the conditioning and getting these guys kind of, fit to handle a higher snap count. But again, we'll see what happens, because it doesn't matter how much you prepare. I mean, it's still, you're basically having 50 car crashes a game sometimes. And that's what one defensive tackle, Jason Hatcher, one time told me when I was covering the Cowboys. So that's what it was like, basically having 50 car crashes a game. So it's like, that creates wear and tear. I don't care, who you are and how strong you are. It just has an effect on the human body.
That's why those backup pieces, Anoeta, Trey Pierce, Cam Brandt, and TJ Guy is probably the one I should have said first. Their development and the role they ended up playing is gonna be huge for this team. But I think, we've said it all offseason. It feels like there's no question this is the strength of this team. This is the top heaviest, and also maybe the deepest unit on the team. I could argue 4 of the top 10 players on this team are starting right along that line. I mean, Mason and KG are both in the top 4. And then I would put Derek Moore and Josiah Stewart somewhere. 8 to 12. They are really key pieces.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody who's kind of, clued into some of the stuff that, or heard with the rumblings. They feel like this could be at least just as good from a talent standpoint, like at the top level as last year's defense. Like they think they could be just as good at that point. It's the depth that's the concern. And I agree with, I think the defensive line, the depth is good, but it's not the same level as they had last year. They don't have the experience depth that they had last year. Where they're rotating a guy like Braden McGregor into the game, or, somebody like
Chris Jenkins, Jalen Harrell,
or Kenneth Graham. Kenneth Graham was backing up, Chris Jenkins. You had
they got Rayshawn Benny backing up. They got TJ Guy. It's not the same. But and then you could argue the front end is better than last year's front end, and the depth is not as good.
Yes,
but
right. That's what I think. Yeah, I think the front end could be better than potentially it was last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is. And that's a good segue into the linebacking room, where I found something that Grant Newsome said today fascinating. We've been talking, again, with so much turnover, it feels like we've focused on every position at some point or another throughout the offseason. But again, linebacker was one of those units, one of those rooms for me where I said there could be some sneaky fall off. It's very underrated what Junior Colson and Michael Barrett did the last couple of seasons. And then you got Grant Newsome coming out today saying that Maryland transfer Jayshawn Barham is the best linebacker that has been on the team since Newsome's been here, which includes Devin Bush, who was a top 10, top 12 pick in the NFL, and Junior Colson, who was a second rounder last year. He's like, no disrespect, but the guy's just different. Everybody has just raved about the hits, about the speed, about the sound. I think we always get a guy in every camp who's just like the next level, the next coming. A couple years ago, we've gotten Peyton O'Leary sprinkled in before. We've gotten Amarion Walker sprinkled in before. This is the camp of Jayshon Barham.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that again, they've hyped him up as much as they have. I mean, it's been not just Grant Newsome, but Wink Martindale and Sharon Moore. I mean, they've kind of talked about the impact he's made. And if that's the case, I mean, you kind of have to bank on a little bit of what Wink Martindale is saying, just based on the fact that he's had some really good linebackers. He knows what a good linebacker looks like with Ray Lewis, and so. So I mean, you have to take that into account. However, I mean, it's just like, it's hard to, go in with and just say this in camp versus just, again, Michigan's offense and what have you, and not having any kind of outside perspective. Again, it's the same reason why, you have to be kind of careful not to, or just think that Colston Loveland is the automatic Mackey Award winner, just because, again, that's who you're closest to, that's who you're seeing. But, again, I mean, if this guy really is as good as advertised, I mean, then maybe Michigan's defense may be able to not only perform at the level it did last year, but maybe exceed it.
He could unlock that. And just for the record, I'm not picking Colston Loveland to win the Mackey just because I cover Michigan. I think he's the best tight end. Okay, I know. But there is a recency bias. I mean, it's inherent. I mean, when I was filling out my preseason,
it's proximity. Like, why people again, and Michigan thought, Donovan Edwards is, again, the best running back or whatever, because
I don't think
it's the fact that Donovan Peoples-Jones was going to be really, really, because he played at Cass Tech.
And every team, every school does it.
Yeah,
everybody does it for their guys.
But it's like, but it's a proximity bias too.
And the other linebackers to mention in that room, obviously Ernest Hausman, the two, and then Jimmy Rolder was talked up by Sharon Moore earlier this week as the number 3, and seemed like a genuine confidence, not sometimes you're trying to talk yourself into it. Felt like he meant it with that one. Last but not least, the defensive backs. I don't think I'll get any flack for this one. The best defensive back in America, Will Johnson, is the anchor of the secondary. And then you got a 5th-year senior, Makari Page. Sounds like 6th-year senior, Quentin Johnson will start next to him. And then it's going to be the nickel and CB2, some younger guys, high upside guys. Zeke Berry, I think, at nickel, even though he's been split in time at safety, 50-50, he said. And then CB2, Jair Hill, the sophomore out of Kankakee, Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's probably the second strongest unit on arguably the team. Maybe you can make the case the tight ends are, but a lot of people think the DBs are pretty strong across the board. They added obviously a bunch of depth with their transfer acquisitions following the spring. The big loss, though, is Rod Moore. I mean, again, you're having a positionless defense. This guy's supposedly the, kind of the brains of the operation, especially on the field. Having his perspective not there on the field in the heat of battle, when the quote unquote bullets are flying and, things are going on and he has to make adjustments on the fly. That's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, I think, they've got some guys that are obviously very knowledgeable about the defense with Will Johnson and Quentin Johnson in particular. But, Rod Moore is, there was a reason why Wake Martindale kind of thought he was going to be the Eric Weddle, type, the kind of person who's going to organize things. And I think that could actually end up being a little bit of a worry sign to me if they're planning to run as much as they sound like they're going to run right off the bat.
Yeah, Rod Moore felt like a lock for the green dot. And I don't know that short of Mason Graham or Will Johnson, I don't know that anyone on this team, one injury would feel as significant as Rod Moore. And you don't normally say that about a safety either. But again, I think the thing about this room, and it's funny, you're like, if you were ranking the positions, maybe tight end, I went back earlier this summer. One of the things I did was rank the position groups. I did put defensive back 2nd and tight end 3rd. So we're right on it, at least in agreement with each other. But the reason that this room and this unit is so deep is so good is because of the depth. There we go. Got a little ahead of myself there. But I mean, if you look at what could be like their full second line, right? So you could have Amir Hall, who was an FCS All-American at Albany last year. Jaden McBurrows at nickel. He could be one corner. Then Jaden McBurrows could be at nickel. I mean, at safety, you could have Jaden Mangum from Michigan State. There's Wesley Walker from Tennessee. And then Ricky Johnson from UNLV at the other corner spot. That's not to mention Keyshawn Harris. And this is all off top of my head, right? I mean, if I was looking at the roster, I'm sure I'm missing one or two guys, but that's 11 dudes who have played or they are very confident, are every bit at this level. The only one who's not excelled at this level is Amir Hall, and he just needs to prove that he can do it at this level. But yeah, no, I mean, if the simulated pressures can continue to cause the havoc that they have, even though it'll be a little bit different. I mean, what have they said? They've said same scheme, different style. I think that's kind of the idea of this. If it can be 80% as effective, then they got all the pieces in the secondary. In my estimation, I don't think we need to go over the special teams too much, other than Dominic Zavada. We'll see his former team, Arkansas State, in week 3. He has won the job over Adam Samaha, a Huron River rat. He's from Ann Arbor. And punter, it will still be, he's from Tommy Doman. There's his name. I was like, why can't I think of his name? Any thoughts about special teams, Reiner? I mean, I think it could be. I mean, they've been very good in this unit for some time now, and it's been underrated.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see the effect of Jay Harbaugh's departure there. I mean, I think Jay Harbaugh was really key to that special teams unit being very good. They always seem pretty well organized and strong in all facets, pretty much. And so it'll be something to watch. I mean, JB Brown, I guess, is the guy that's handling that now, and so he's got big shoes to fill. So that's always an area that you don't really care about until it ends up negatively affecting you. And Michigan State fans could talk about that all day with Ross Ells.
They have struggled in that unit in recent years, no doubt.
But again, it could also be in the difference between winning and losing, as Jake Moody showed in 2022, leading into the Ohio State game.
Mm-hmm. Against Illinois, stole it from them on Senior Day. All right, perfect. That's where we're going to put a bow on that. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, you will hear who we think will win the game and why. We'll get into the picks, a little bit of Connor Stalions talk. Don't go anywhere. It's Hail Yes. Welcome back. Time for the picks. We're going to keep it shorter, succinct. We know what we want to say, and we're going to say it. Andrew, take us home.
It is pick seasons, fellas. Let's go. I'm fired up. Michigan, Fresno State, you guys know the drill. Let's start with them. 21.5 point spread. Do the Wolverines cover in game 1?
No, I don't have them covering. I think Fresno State, coming off a 9-4 season, they were ranked briefly. They've got a quarterback who's pretty dangerous returning. Granted, they had the coaching changed midsummer, so that's a little bit of a worry sign for going into a game like this against Michigan. However, I just think there's some question marks about how well Michigan's offense is going to function. And I think Fresno State's quality enough to be able to kind of keep it within 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm totally with Reiner. And the one reason I have Fresno State covering is I don't think that the coaching change will be quite as drastic as something like this could be, because Skipper, the guy who has taken over for Jeff Tedford, he's done this before. He's been the interim at Fresno State before. He did it, I think it was back in 19. Then he had to do the bowl game last year. So this is not new. he played for the program. He's intimately familiar with Fresno State and all that they do. And then the other reason, Reiner started with it. Mikey Keene, this is a legit quarterback. This guy can play some ball. I mean, he can throw it, he can run, he can extend the plays. Threw for almost 3,000 yards last year in a tough Mountain West. 24 touchdowns, 10 picks. He's the best quarterback in this game. I haven't seen Michigan's quarterback, and for my money, he is going to be the best quarterback on this field. And then if you look at who also returns with him, Jalen Moss, Mac Delana, Josiah Freeman, three of their leading receivers from a season ago who, they combined for like over 1,500 yards and like 10 touchdowns or so. And then, they added a couple of 1,000-yard receivers from the FCS level in Shaden James and Raylan Sharp, who was All-American at Missouri State. Their running back, whose name is currently escaping me, ran for almost 1,000 yards. Malik Sherrod is his name. He ran for almost 1,000. This is a good football team. This is a legitimate football team. They've beaten Purdue recently. They've beaten UCLA recently. Washington State recently. Minnesota. I'm not calling for that, but 3 touchdowns and a hook, depending on the book you get it on. I got to see what Michigan's offense looks like before I think they're just going to beat a very legitimate team by 3 scores.
And, they also added that Corey Foreman kid from USC, who was one time a 5-star recruit. Yeah, the edge player. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, again, that guy could end up being a factor, especially given the new offensive line that Michigan has, and the quarterbacks uncertainty with Michigan too. So that's a player to watch for, Corey Foreman.
One of my gambling rules of thumb is if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And 21.5 points is like, whoa, wait, what? 21.5 for Fresno State, a decent team, night game at Big House, first game of the year, decent quarterback. So first of all, that gives me a little bit of a scare. Secondly, I think with that night game, the crowd and the whole new era under Sherrod Moore, I think Michigan gets out to a bit of an early lead, maybe even 7-0, 14-0, and then that D-line gets to go to work. So, that's a whole different bottle of wine, as my mom would say. So once that happens, all bets are off. So I think Fresno State, could give them a little bit of a scare early, but I think Michigan ends up covering. So I'm going to go different than you guys there. So, all right. Game of the weekend, probably, possibly could be upstaged later on, but this one's at noon, right? Start the day off. Georgia versus Clemson. It's in Atlanta. So, basically at Georgia. I don't know how Georgia always gets to host these neutral site games in Atlanta. So, fellas, 13.5 points. Reiner, we'll start with you.
Yeah. It's, that's a pretty big, spread. And I think, you don't want to count Dabo out. A lot of people have because of his stance on the transfer portal and everything else. And, the little bit of drop off that they've had, from where they were, 5 years ago, I guess, with the championship, runs that they were making at that point. And so, I'd
say a lot.
I would say a huge drop off. I think it's been enough that they're not.
They were like,
they're not the same.
They were like Georgia. They were right there as Alabama. Now they're, basically kind of, Penn State is essentially what they are now.
But I still think that they've got some good pieces. And again, the issue with, I think, Clemson has been, in addition to the players, maybe not being across the board as strong, but the staff, that has been poached.
Dabo not using the portal.
From Dabo. Yeah, that's
a big problem.
Yeah. But I still think, again, when you do count him out, sometimes he seems to pull a rabbit out of his hat or be able to, or he's coaches at his strongest. So that's why I think Georgia is maybe not as strong across the board as they've been. I think they're again, one of the number one team in the country, and that's right now. But again, I don't think that they're at the elite level maybe they were 2 or 3 years ago. So that's kind of my thinking on this game, that it's going to be a little bit closer than maybe people think.
I think we'll disagree eventually, but I'm kind of with Reiner. Kate Klubnik is, if in week 1, if you have a quarterback who's returned, right, decent, proven,
right,
I just like that. I just like that formula early. It's just that certainty. Phil Moffa is a decent running back. And then they got like the Tyler Brown, who's one of the better receivers in the ACC. There's pieces. They still recruit well. It's Clemson, and like you're telling me it could be 31-13 with 4 minutes left. Georgia's starters are out of the game, and Clemson gets some useless late touchdown to cover 31-20, 31. I mean, I'll take it. 13.5 is just a lot of points. So give me the quarterback I know. Give me the points.
That hook feels like a big deal. I'll say that. That's why I kind of lean Georgia. If that was 14, I would not feel nearly as confident because it feels like maybe a 31-17 or a 38-17 with maybe a late Georgia touchdown or something along those lines. So
go for two.
Yeah. So I just try not to go against Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State in these early season games because as exciting as it is a lot of times to see, especially with these SEC dominant teams, you get all excited. Oh, Alabama's playing USC. You guys remember that game, I'm sure, Reiner. Or Alabama's playing Michigan. Or, Georgia's playing Notre Dame. And then a huge majority of the time, they end up being massive blowouts. So I'm going to take Georgia. And then if it's close, I'm happy. We got a good football game to start the day off. Let's move on to a Big Ten game here. Penn State at West Virginia. West Virginia, 8-point favorites. Penn State on the road. Tony, who do you got here?
Well, Penn State would need to score 8 points in order to cover this. So I like West Virginia. I mean, I haven't seen Penn State score 8 points in some time. That's not true. I mean, I think Penn State, am I remembering right? They just hammered West Virginia recently. It was like a 41-13 game, like a couple years back. I haven't looked this up, honest. But I just feel like I remember something like that. Or maybe it was the other way. I don't know. But, I mean, West Virginia.
38-15. 38-15 last year at Penn State. So
and West Virginia, who won?
Penn State won 38-15 at Penn State.
Okay, so little revenge. Yeah, I was going to say no one went in, and they didn't go into Happy Valley and beat them by 3 touchdowns, obviously. So I did know that, but I mean, now they're back in Morgantown, right? Morgantown. I'm not going to act like I know West Virginia's depth chart. 8 points is a decent amount of points. Penn State still has Drew Aller under center, and I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. And he can't throw anything. So, Mountaineers.
I'm going to jump in front of you here, Reiner, because Drew Aller, I'm no Drew Aller super fan. Last year against West Virginia, I have the benefit of having just looked up the score of this game 2 seconds ago. Tony.
All those passes were 6 yards.
21 for 29, 21 for 29, 325 yards, and 3 touchdowns. If we get that again, even close to that, I'm rolling with Penn State. I don't think West Virginia is that good, and I think Penn State takes care of business. 8's a lot of points on the road, but Penn State, if they want to, first of all, James Franklin needs to get in the playoff probably this year. If he can't beat West Virginia, that's a bad start. I'm rolling with Penn State.
Yeah, I'm going to roll with Penn State too here. I mean, I just think that. Again, with some of the players that are returning, especially on offense, and then you combine it with, Tom Allen's the defensive coordinator, and now Manny D's, moves on. He's going to want to come out, and prove himself really quickly. I mean, the thing is, West Virginia is going to, a starting quarterback that's returning, starting running back is returning. So I do think West Virginia is going to be able to give them, or push them for pretty much the entire game. But I think at the end, Penn State kind of ends up pulling it, or pulling away from them at the end. And so I'm gonna go with Penn State here. This is a program I'm more familiar with anyway, so I usually lean towards that.
This is the 6th year that Neil Brown has been the head coach at West Virginia. Doesn't it feel like Dana Holgorsen was there like 2 years ago? That's crazy. 9-4 last year. West Virginia did finish though. So, all right, let's move on. Notre Dame at Texas A&M. This is going to be a fun one. I was just reading that Notre Dame had the volume cranked up to, quote, the loudest that they've ever heard practicing for the Texas A&M game. It should be a heck of an environment down there. So, Texas A&M, year 1 of a new administration, 3-point favorites against Notre Dame. Tony?
I mean, normally I would pick against both these teams in this spot. because I don't know how many times I've watched Notre Dame and A&M just come into the season, top 10, all the hype, get blown out, finish 8-4, and just be irrelevant nationally. And I don't know that that's not going to be the case again this year. And Reiner, I'm going to go with your theory. I'm more familiar with Notre Dame in general. That's literally the extent of my pick. And I think Marcus Freeman is a decent coach. I think he's made like some learning mistakes on the job in game the past couple years. And I don't wonder if they can. I mean, Texas A&M, they probably spent all their oil money reloading in the portal and everything. I don't know. I couldn't tell you much about Texas A&M other than they are consistently overrated. And so I'm going to take Notre Dame because you're giving me some points, right? They can lose on a field goal as time expires, and we're all walking away kissing our sister. So 3 points.
I think I think the most interesting aspect of this is the fact that Notre Dame's quarterback is Riley Leonard, who played for Mike Elko, and is going against Mike Elko in his first game at Notre Dame. So, but I like Texas A&M because of Mike Elko. I think Mike Elko did a great job at Duke. I think he brings a different mindset to College Station. They're going to be raring to go. I think College Game Day is there this week. So the place is going to be cranked up. I mean, Kyle Field is always loud. It's a real tough place to play. I don't know if Notre Dame is going to be able to just come out in that environment and be able to kind of take control. I think there's a lot of things working in A&M's favor just from the atmosphere and circumstances standpoint.
So Notre Dame, it feels like they've been disappointing the last few years, but maybe not quite as bad as I had remembered it being. 10-3 last year, 9-4 in the first year under Marcus Freeman, 11-2, 10-2, 11-2, 12-1, 10-3. So, I mean, they've consistently found a way to win a game like this a season, I'd say, because they're not consistently running the table, but they're finding a way to get a solid win. The other reason I'm running with Notre Dame here is because if you look at their schedule, they kind of need to win this game to have any real chance at having any wiggle room the rest of the way. After Texas A&M, they got Northern Illinois, Purdue, Miami, Ohio, Louisville, Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy, Florida State, not as good as we thought they were probably, Virginia, Army, and USC. Where is the quality wins on there? So basically, if they have to go perfect the rest of the way if they don't win this game. I think Texas A&M, new administration, this is a tough game to start up with. So I think they have a little more wiggle room there. So I'm going with Notre Dame with the points here.
Yeah. No, I'm with it. I mean, tough games early, tough games late, but yeah, I mean, you read the schedule. It's pretty cupcake. You're right. They got to grab it. And you talk about Notre Dame hasn't been bad. They've been Michigan. They've been Michigan pre this 3-year run, somewhere between 9-4, 11-2. You're going to be good. You're going to be top 15. You're going to be in the games. Struggle to get over the hump. That's what Michigan had been historically. That's what Notre Dame has been historically. Most teams are. I mean, that's what a good teams are. Like, you want to get to that level. It's not a knock. Yeah.
And two other teams who have kind of been in that realm here, USC and LSU. So LSU had the national championship, but ever since it's just been really weird. They are 4-point favorites over USC. Lincoln Riley trying to reboot after a disastrous year with Caleb Williams last year. So, Reiner, USC 4-point underdogs in Las Vegas. It's a neutral site game against LSU. Who you got?
I'm taking LSU. I mean, again, Brian Kelly, in his third year, has typically had a breakout year. And I know there's some question marks again about, how they're going to, replace, the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback. But, the fact is that Brian Kelly's offenses just typically do really well. And I just think pound for pound across the board, I trust LSU a little bit more than USC. Now, I think USC, is going to be steadily improving over the course of the season, and especially with Danton Lynn running defense there. And I think you're going to see some significant strides being made on that side of the ball. But I don't know if they're going to be as potent offensively. And you're going against an SEC level defense right off the gate. right out of the gate, excuse me. And so I think it's going to be, that's the kind of where I lean towards LSU in this game.
If you recall last year at all, and this podcast, you would know that my shtick became just taking dumps all over USC. That was like my favorite thing to do because they were dreadful, especially on defense. Losing Caleb Williams, number 1 overall pick, doesn't really help. Flip the coordinators, getting rid of Alex Grinch sure does. They've got elite. I mean, he's only one guy, but Zachariah Branch is, he might be the most electric player in the Big Ten. And he can keep up. And Miller Moss, highly rated quarterback, coming out of high school as well. And you talk about Brian Kelly getting things going in year 3. Lincoln Riley, when he was in Oklahoma, we just did the exercise a few weeks ago, right? It was 12-2, 12-2, 12-2. It was consistent winning. He's not lived up to that yet at USC. I expect that will change. And you're going to give me more than a field goal. And the neutral site is much closer to USC. I'll take the Trojans.
So, first of all, I think USC is going to be better than people think this year. There's kind of like a hangover of that weird season. Their defense was disastrous. Beyond disastrous. I'm taking the Trojans because LSU is terrible in these first games of the season. 2020, they lost game 1 of the year to Mississippi State. Next year, 2021, they lose to UCLA. Year after that, 2022, they lose to Florida State by 1 point. Last year, they lost to Florida State as well, 24-45. So that's 2020, 21, 22, 23. 4 years in a row, they've lost that game. You kind of just have this image of LSU, but they've actually been getting better as the year's been going on for the last 2 years with Brian Kelly. So I'm rolling with the Trojans here. I think that they knock off LSU straight up, actually, and get a big Big Ten over SEC expanded win here. So that wraps us up for us as far as the picks go. But honestly, I thought the games weren't as good as they are. These should be fun games all weekend long.
Yeah. No, that was good work by you on that research, on that dive. It has felt like that. I didn't realize that. LSU's always in the big game. I didn't realize they'd lost all of them. I feel better. Yeah, with that USC pick. Were any of their losses because of Connor Stalions scouting? He didn't scout any of their games, I don't think.
Possibly. There is a network of developed spies that we apparently did not know about that was referenced in this new documentary. I think you're launching us into here.
Yes, that is where I'm taking us. We're gonna keep it brief because we've already held on to you all long enough. But if you're here this long, stay with us. Netflix's Untold, the series continued, and it was Steinstealer, the documentary, as was called. I'm not sure if it lived up to that, but of Connor Stalions, a former recruiting staffer for Michigan. By now, you certainly know the story. Last year, there was an investigation that found or that claimed that he was sort of the mastermind of a sign-stealing operation where he would send tickets to accomplices. They would then go to stadiums of future opponents, sit on the sideline and use their binoculars, use their camera, use technology, basically, point it over at the opposite team sideline and just start deciphering signals, writing them down, or I guess logging the signals, and then they would bring it back to Stalions, who would then decipher them. And when they would play at an opponent, he'd be right there on the sideline, and he'd be kind of espousing signals and signing things off and pointing to the sky and what have you. That's what we knew. That's what had been reported. Now, for the first time, we got to hear from Connor Stalions on what his thoughts are of the whole thing. And he said he didn't break any rules. He said he operated in the gray. He said that he did not break rules. He exposed he found the loopholes, exposed their weak points, exploited them. Open forum here, fellas. We'll start with Reiner. Did you learn anything from this? Did your opinion change positively, negatively of Connor, of the program, and just of your thoughts about the layers to which people did or did not know?
I again, it was set up so that, again, there's this plausible deniability that was trying to be kind of sold to everybody that, but it was hard to believe. I mean, in the sense that, like, here's a guy that supposedly, memorized all these signs. I mean, like, sounded like hundreds and hundreds, signs, but then he couldn't recall whether he was on the sideline for the Central Michigan State game. So, I mean, like, he loses his credibility right there, I think. And I think that was the issue that most objective people would come away with, is just that, I mean, is this guy really believable? And, I mean, even the lawyer, I don't think, for Connor Stalions was able to kind of, sell that, to the viewership that was, watching. So, yeah, I think, most people are probably not going to be swayed one way or the other. But I mean, I think if you're just a random person and you were just watching this, I don't think you would necessarily come away with, like, that's believable. And, like, the idea that you can make an argument, like, where you try to make the argument that, the advanced scouting rule is outdated. But, again, these are rules. The NCAA has rules, and, fair play is, like, essential to sports, in my opinion. And it's like, if you're not going to follow the rules, I mean, what's the point of playing sports? I mean, if the two sides are not playing by the same rules, then that's not a fair game. And that's the issue here. I mean, people can rail against the NCAA for all the other stuff, or that, their concept of amateurism. But when it comes to, like, actual competition on the field, the rules have to be enforced. And that's just my, opinion on the matter. And, it'll always be my opinion on the matter. It's like, again, I mean, why are we watching this if it's not on the level?
Andrew, yay or nay, you feel that people who watched this, you kind of just, as I was saying to Ryan earlier when we were leaving Shedbackler Hole, you kind of just planted your flag a little further, maybe? Like, if you thought this was the worst thing in the world, then you feel like, oh, we'll see. Like, look, they're not. And if you felt it was no big deal, then you're like, well, look, I mean, he's getting game balls for his contribution to the team, right? I mean, everybody thought that he was just like, it is just a one-man rogue thing. Nobody knew all the layers and everything he was doing, right? I mean, where do you fall on this?
Yes and no. So first of all, I think this conversation has to start and end with that this was way too soon for something of this magnitude to come out.
That's true.
Like, the research that needs to go into this to make this a journalistic endeavor was not even close to done. This was a pure entertainment product. And that's okay. That's what Netflix is. No one said Netflix has to be journalistic. They don't. They're literally an entertainment company. So if you start with that, I feel like everything kind of shakes out a bit more. Did I think it was necessarily fair? In a lot of ways, I didn't really think it was fair. Obviously, Connor Stalions wasn't talking to the media. He wasn't doing interviews with us or ESPN or other major properties. How do you think they got him? They probably gave him a lot of control over the narrative of the documentary and freedom to talk about whatever he really wanted to talk about. Because Jim Harbaugh's suspension was, if it was mentioned, I didn't hear it when I watched it one time through. I never heard it mentioned once. There were 2 suspensions that weren't mentioned. Many of the elements of, the minutia and the detail and Michigan fighting the suspension and then dropping it were left out. So yes and no, Tony. I think I would more so say that the casual viewer, like our friend Michael Thomas, who doesn't follow sports at all, saw it on his Netflix feed and started watching it. And his takeaways were kind of like, this guy's crazy, and, crazy for good or bad. There's a lot of crazy successful coaches. And also, like, I don't really understand, what's going on. It's kind of like to us, it was such a known thing, but like, I worry that now this is going to be what people know of this story. And it's really not the full story of what it is. It's the entertainment, the studio, the Hollywood version of kind of what happened.
It was Connor Stalions recounting his version. I think that it's important to keep that in mind, right? Because just because it was given the title documentary does not mean this was truly documenting what happened. It was more like biography, right? Like more like behind the scenes in the life of Connor Stalions, how he came to be, why he was what he was, right?
Right. And he is giving his side of the story. I mean, like, or what he wanted you to believe, based off of that, again, we're trying to try to, I guess, kind of take your eye off the ball or move you off, your preconceived notions based off of what was reported. I mean, that was the goal of this. And, it was, something that, again, I mean, I don't think, again, the casual sports fan is necessarily going to be overly interested. They're probably going to be wondering, like, why is this such a big thing? But, again, for the people who, have been up close with it, I mean, yeah, it was interesting to kind of see the way he was going to spin it. And I think, I don't know if he was effective at being able to convince anybody who it was against, Michigan during this whole process, or, really had deep skepticism over, what happened, whether he was able to kind of, again, eliminate that skepticism.
Andrew, final thoughts.
Yeah, it wasn't made for us. You know what I mean? It wasn't really made for people like us. It was made for casual sports fans who, oh man, what was all that noise about the Michigan last year? I know they're cheating. They were accused of cheating, but like, all right, look, I'll click on this. That's kind of who it was made for. And, for better or worse, I do think the one, for the diehards of the world who have been following it from the start to finish, I think the good thing that came out of it was that we all got to know a little bit more about Stalions and got to know kind of who he is better. You got to see, know who he is, because it was all just rumors and stories and stuff of that nature, but you didn't hear him talk. You'd never heard it from him. So you get to kind of paints a better picture of who this guy was, and the game ball thing was interesting. Him winning the game ball, I thought was, of note, because he wasn't just this random guy in the background. You got Joe Schmo doesn't win the game ball. You know what I mean? So that was a takeaway that I was left with.
I stopped writing low level staffer because I can't claim that anymore. I think low level staffers don't have the type of influence that he did. So I just write former staffer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that suggests otherwise. I mean, even some of this footage that people have clipped where he's standing next to the coordinators and, he motioned something and everybody else motioned something. I mean, again, that stuff wasn't really addressed as much. I mean, again, it's like Michigan really wanted to create this lone wolf idea. And it's again, you have to kind of suspend belief on a lot of this. I mean, if you're going to buy Connor Stalions' line of thinking or what he was trying to sell you through that documentary.
One final thing, I know we got to go. But I was another thing that caught my attention was, Stalions, I think it's fair to say, seems like he thinks that he's the smartest guy in the room a lot of times. And one of the things he kind of like, he was not going to bury Michigan no matter what. He was going to literally sink himself 6 feet under before he was going to say one bad thing about Michigan. And, that's who he is as a person. You could see that coming through the screen. But he did say, when he was getting essentially relieved of his duties, he kind of insinuated that he was like, shoot, yeah, I can tell you everything that's going on. Let me tell you what's going on. And he said that whoever was in that meeting was kind of like, nope, that's not necessary. Like, please don't implicate us. You don't need to tell us what's going on. Like, go home, please. And that it was exactly. He doesn't need say no more. And that kind of maybe was an accidental insight. That was maybe an accidental insight because, if Stalions was a low-level insider, and it is plausible that maybe Jim Harbaugh and Sherrone Moore didn't know how he was getting that information or other people in the program, but they knew he had it and they weren't asking the questions, and that's was the last takeaway that I had when he said that little portion.
Well, I mean, the hints that he was also he was subtly implying some of the stuff that people believed. I mean, the game ball thing being the perfect example of that. He wasn't just some again person that nobody really knew about, and just this it was operating off in his own silo. That was always something that people were like skeptical about anyway. He kind of threw water on that, and then the idea that, I mean, again, he was kind of introduced or brought in the program by Partridge, and Chris Partridge was obviously one of the people who was let go amid this whole situation coming out. And it's just like, there are little nuggets that he dropped that kind of subtly implied some things if you wanted to go down the and kind of believe some of the stuff that you had already kind of were able to suss out, before this, or that, already had some kind of theories on, like he kind of, would have given you license to believe some of that stuff too, I think. And that was interesting to me, was that, there were things that he kind of hurt, I guess, Michigan's case, I think, in some ways. I also think the timing of the documentary hurt Michigan. I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, this guy supposedly loves Michigan. This thing was released Tuesday before their season opener. Like, talk about a distraction. I mean, like, people were asking the players and the coaches about it. So it's, I think it's interesting that this, like, really, really devoted Michigan guy, but, is coming out with a, documentary that doesn't necessarily paint Michigan and focuses on the cheating scandal and the, at this point. I mean, when
it drags it out. And then when you talk about the timing of it, right? I mean, Michigan has 90 days to respond. That would be the Monday of Ohio State week, right? And so it's just gonna, I mean, it can just keep getting dragged out here. But this episode was dragged out here, but we made it through. And that's what happens when it's football season, baby. We are back. Like to say better than ever. So thank you for listening. And thanks as always to the people who make this happen. That is our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and our audio engineer, Robin Chan. For Andrew, for Reiner, I'm Tony. Michigan, Fresno State, 7:34 p.m. kickoff, Saturday, August 31st, under the lights in Ann Arbor. That's where we'll be, and we will have tons of coverage on freep.com. So check it out. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon. This is Hail Yes.